Well, this morning, we're launching into a new series about what matters most in this world. And we get reminded about this sometimes. When a baby is born, and we see this helpless, inconceivably precious life. Or when a couple comes and stands on a platform like this one and declares their lifelong devotion to one another. When we hear the story about a soldier laying down their life for their friends. Or when an elderly woman with dementia is cared for by her husband day after day, year after year. When a cold heart melts and a marriage that was headed for disaster gets reborn. Or when someone is laying in a hospital bed and they're surrounded by friends and family that have shared life with that person. In those moments, we know, don't we, that it's all about love. Life is all about love. Love is real. Love is what matters. Love is the measure of our humanity. Love is the purpose of our lives. Love is what God asks of us. It's all about love. Now, at the beginning of a new year, people often make resolutions. You know, this, I want to be a better person. And I was thinking, like, getting ready for this week, what's the one resolution that if you keep it, for sure, you know God will be pleased? Like, what's the one resolution that if I keep it, I can be sure I will know that God is pleased? Because there's a lot of stuff that a lot of resolutions I could make and I could keep, and yet I could get life wrong. The number one category for resolutions is, anybody want to guess? Weight. Okay, getting in better shape, yes. Weight loss, fixing up the body, baby. Now, in the Bible, the strongest, healthiest guy was probably a man named Samson. And his life, as it turns out, was a train wreck. Okay, he's in great shape, but his life is a mess. Second most popular resolution is around financial well-being. You know, I want to get my financial life in order. Jesus told a story one time about a rich guy who, he said, had his best financial year. More income, and he tore down his old barns and he built new ones, and he ends up dying, and somebody else gets all of his stuff, and Jesus ends up calling him a fool. A lot of people have goals around career success. You know, I just want my career to take off, you know, to increase my career success. The most successful guy, really, in Jesus' day was a man named Herod, and he was a monster. Or people have educational goals. You know, I want to get smarter. The smartest guy in the Bible was a man named Solomon, and he ended up with 1,000 wives. So I'm just saying, I don't know how, sometimes it's always good. Like, how can he be the wisest man and have 1,000 wives? Like, when you think about it, what would possibly be a can't-miss resolution? Well, Paul was writing in his letter to the church in Corinth, and in the 13th chapter, there's this amazing passage. And Paul says, if I speak in the tongues of men or of angels, but do not have love, I'm only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and give over my body to hardship that I may boast, but do not have love, he says, I gain nothing. Now, put in our context, in our day, we might rewrite that. Sounds something like this. Though I have more Twitter followers than Katy Perry, though I get a BA from Wazoo, a master's from UW, and a doctorate from Stanford, though I invent Snapchat and Instagram and WhatsApp and Uber, though I have great hair and white teeth and low body fat, though I solve global warming, set philanthropic records, and drive a Hummer that runs on compost, if I don't have love, I'm nothing. And we might put the equation like this. According to Paul, see, everything minus love equals what? Nothing. See, if I have everything, but I don't have love, I have nothing. Everything minus love equals nothing. And on the other hand, Nothing plus love equals what? Everything. If I have nothing but I add love, it's everything. And Paul kind of got this formula from somebody. Jesus once said that all of life really boils down to this: love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your mind and all your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. It's like, guys, it's all about love. So personally, okay, I have just one resolution this year. I want to be a more loving person by the end of this year than I am today. I want to actually go into training to become a more loving person. And really, that's my hope for our church. And maybe you'd want to make that your resolution as well. Now, when you think about it, if your goal was to become physically fit, you'd probably join a gym. If you want more financial health, you might use an investment firm. Okay, if you want more career success, you might take on a mentor or take some classes. But like, if you want to grow in your capacity to love, where should you go? Okay, this is not that trick of a question. It's a crazy idea. If you want to grow in love, where should you go? Yes. Thank you, Kathy. Yes. God bless you. If you want, guys, if you want to grow in your capacity to love, the place to go is the church. Like you're there. The whole purpose of where we are is to increase the amount of love in our world. And the sad thing is churches can get really fuzzy on this in super destructive ways. The Apostle Paul wrote, the goal of our instruction is love. Like, that's it. He's like, the goal of our instruction is love, from a pure heart and a good conscience and a sincere faith. Okay, the goal of Christian instruction is not people who know a lot. It's people who love a lot. Okay, though I know the whole Bible and could quote it back and forth, if I don't have love, I'm nothing. As a matter of fact, we're even told in the Bible itself by Paul that knowing can sometimes be a problem. Paul warned the Corinthians one time. He says, knowledge puffs up, but love builds up. And arrogance for church people can be a real problem. I think we've all seen it. The superiority and the judgment and the self-righteousness. And I think that the world is watching all of that and is asking, why are so many churches jerk factories? I mean, like, you think about it, you go, it's okay, it's absolutely okay that churches attract jerks, but we're not supposed to produce them. Dallas Willard one time said, it's rare to find a church that is practically oriented around Jesus' simple instruction, love one another as I have loved you. You might think that this would be the primary goal, but it usually turns out to be otherwise. And it does, doesn't it? I mean, and so can I just say right up front, as we're starting off a new year, thinking about where we're headed as people, thinking about where we're headed as a church, guys, that's our primary goal. That we would become more loving people who increase love in our world. Now, we're launching this series prompted by a book called The 5 Love Languages. But it's about way more than just, here's some tips on how to have a good relationship. Because this is the great purpose of human existence as designed by God. Okay, so what is our ultimate aim as a church? It's that through us and among us, love would be lived. Guys, no matter what other good things might be happening, if we're not increasing in our capacity to love, we are completely missing the point. Now, before we get to some tangibles straight out of the 5 love languages, we really ought to ask one more important question. And that is, what is love as Jesus understood it and practiced it? And that can be very simply defined this way. To love somebody is to will and to work for their good. I'll say that again, okay? To love somebody is to will and to work for their good. So love is not primarily a feeling, as we know. It's certainly going to involve feelings. It's not primarily a desire that we have. It's not primarily closeness that we experience. It's not primarily being agreeable or doing whatever it is that you want me to do. And one problem we face when it comes to the word love is that we use it for so many different things, don't we? I mean, we say, I love you. We say, I love my child. I love my house. I love my job. Say, I love Seattle. We say, I love pizza. What does that mean? I mean, what does it mean to love pizza? Well, it doesn't mean that I am constantly willing and working for the good of the pizza. Actually, if it goes just right, my love will consume the pizza. Like, I'll destroy it. And so Jesus understood love as a God-powered, like, condition of being in which I will the good of everybody in which I come into contact. Jesus understood love to be this God-empowered way of life, a condition of being, a mode of existence in which I will and work for the good of everybody. And this concept of love that Jesus had was so revolutionary in his day that his followers had to find a word for it. And they took a Greek word, and some of you know this, many of you know this. They used a Greek word called agape to describe this love. Now, that word agape was very rarely used. When we look through Greek literature, it's very rarely used. This was not the common word of the day. It was not widely used or particularly well defined during the time of Jesus, but it's like the disciples later on, they needed a word that they could fill with content to be able to explain to the world the nature of this love that Jesus taught and lived. And they're envisioning him on the cross and all that he did to love them and the whole world. And they picked this word, agape. And in the New Testament, they used it over and over and over. Usually when you come across the word love in the New Testament, it is this word agape. This love that was taught and lived out by Jesus. And we'll sometimes say, like, well, you know, it's easy for me to love this person, but it's like super hard for me to love that person. And the thing is that Jesus didn't use the word love in that way. We don't love some people and not others based on how we feel about them. The idea is that we are constantly becoming more and more loving persons. It's a condition of being that begins to pervade us. It's like being healthy. A condition where I am so rooted in God's love for me and increasingly free of sin, which is always opposed to love, so that I'm ready to will the good of any person that might cross my path. Because, see, I'm a loving person regardless of who that person is or how they feel about me. In fact, this kind of love, agape love, where I will and work for the good of others, will express itself very differently depending on the condition of the person that I'm with. I mean, different conditions require different expressions of love. If somebody's hungry and I love them with agape love, what am I going to do? I'm going to feed them. I got to find them something to eat. Maybe even a whole system of feeding them that goes on and on. If somebody is lonely and I love them with agape love, I'll try to connect with them or invite them. Find a way for them to begin to experience community. If somebody is discouraged and I love them with agape love, I'll try to find a way to encourage them or cheer them up. Hey, and that's all awesome. We kind of like all of that stuff. But let's put this into a little bit different context. Let's say that I'm with a child. And let's say it's my child. And let's say that my child is a spoiled brat. They're not. It's one of the weird things about being a pastor's kid. Cameron has, by the way, he has a black eye from the youth retreat last night. And it has nothing to do with me expressing anger in inappropriate ways. So, let's say I'm with a child, and that child is a spoiled brat, and it is my child. If I love that child with agape love, what am I going to give that child? Discipline. Guys, I'm going to give him discipline. Now, and here's where love gets really challenging. If I give food to a hungry guy, okay, he'll see that I'm loving, and he'll be grateful, and we'll feel close. If I give encouragement to a discouraged guy, he will see me as loving and we'll feel close. If I give discipline to a spoiled brat, okay, will they think that I'm loving? Will we feel close? No. And this is what's hard. In order to be a loving person, I have to be prepared sometimes to be seen as unloving. Which means, see, that I will need to have a source for love that's so stable that it enables me to live in a confrontational way when that's what's needed. To love well, I have to be rooted in a secure source of love that's more stable than any human being can possibly be. That's why Paul writes, and I pray that you being rooted, he says, I pray that you being rooted, which is such an interesting word. I pray that you being rooted and established in love, that your love, you would just be rooted in it, established in love, may have power together with all the Lord's holy people to grasp how wide and deep and long and high is the love of Christ. Now you think about it, like when a tree is rooted in the soil, it's getting nurtured. It's being kept alive. It's being fed. And it's being stabilized. It won't get blown over. And Paul says, guys, I want that, I want you to be that way. I want you to be rooted in the love of God. And see, agape love arises out of this one condition. It's being rooted in God's love. And because of its nature, this kind of love is unshakable. And it's powerful. And now often in our day, when we talk about the power of love, and we're always talking about the power of love and how powerful it is, but we're talking about feelings because the feeling of being in love can be so powerful, right? But to Jesus and then to his followers, Paul and John and so on, agape love, this God-powered love, was never about feelings. It was about a condition of being where no matter what, we always will and work for the good of others. And this is why Paul says in 1 Corinthians 13, love never fails. I mean, think about that. Did he mean that? Love never fails. Why? Because it always wills and works for the good, no matter what. And this is why Paul also says, nothing can separate us from the love, the agape of God. Now you think about that. Like no matter what. No matter what you've done, no matter what circumstances you're in, no matter how ashamed or guilty or inadequate you might feel, God is always, always, always willing and working toward your good. Why? Because he loves you. And that's what love does. Now Paul says, now being rooted in that, becoming rooted in that, you then learn to live like that. So now, with agape love, like always before us, that's our goal. We're ready to kind of dive into this book a little bit, the 5 love languages, where, again, for those of you that are hearing this, again, the core idea is that we all have ways that we most readily express and receive love, okay? So let me just run through these real quick. For some people, their natural love language is words. They love to speak and to hear words of love. The way they most feel love is through words. And maybe that's for you, that's you. For other people, their primary language is quality time. It's like when you hang out with me and spend meaningful time with me, then I feel love. And it's how I most naturally express love. And for some of you, the most important thing is quality time. For some people, it's through the giving of gifts. There are some people that they just love to be thoughtful and creative with gifts. It's just like they're over the top. And the giving of gifts is just how they naturally express and receive love. Some people especially value acts of service. And some of you just want to do an act of kindness for somebody. And you want to serve. And you feel most loved and you feel most loving when that's how it's being expressed. Some of you, the most natural expression is actually physical touch. It's a handshake or a pat on the back or an embrace. And so if you think about these, probably some come more naturally to you than others. And if you aren't real sure and you're wondering like where you're at with this, you're going to go, I don't know. There's a little survey in the back of the book that we handed out for the Christmas services, and we have a few left on the way out. If you want to grab one, you are welcome to it. That is not the same thing as the visitor gift that Jen explained earlier. So if you're a visitor today, it's bonus day. But I just want to say there's a survey in there. It might be kind of fun. I don't know about you. I like taking surveys and finding out about me. And maybe you want to have the people at home with you take it, or people that you know that you're close to. Okay, so we're going to walk through these kind of starting one by one for 5 weeks, starting today. And now you can see that the words, the words is first on the list. And you might think that it would make sense today that we would start with words. But many of you didn't know this. Today happens to be my birthday. I'm 29. Again. And it just seemed good to me to start with love expressed through gifts. I'm totally kidding. We're going to start with words. Okay, so, but it is my birthday. So, the Apostle Paul wrote this. He said, "Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen." So genuine love seeks to be helpful according to the other person's need. Not according to my natural preference or however I happen to feel. I have to think about how what I'm saying or what I'm doing will be received. Not just about what I feel like saying or doing. And those of you that have multiple kids, you see the different personalities in them, right? It's just shocking sometimes. I mean, like you go, how can they have the same genetics, I think, and yet they're like totally different people. Totally different people. Like the way they respond and the things that they value and the way that they receive and express love. And for me, like all three of my kids they're so different. With Brooklyn, our 8-year-old, the way that she responds to love, she really responds to words of affirmation. And so at bedtime, for years, we've had this little thing. And I'll go in and I'll say goodnight and I'll say, "You are my favoriteest, Brooklyn." And for years, she would kind of respond to that and say, "Dad, I'm the only Brooklyn you know." And I'd say, "Oh, no, I know other Brooklyns. But you are my favoriteest, Brooklyn." And then she'd say, "Well, you're my favoriteest, Daddy." Now, I know that this is totally stupid. But she really likes it. And so, we started this when she was like 3, and it's kind of tailored off a little bit. But sometimes I'll still go in and say, "You're my favoriteest, Brooklyn." And I'll reach up, and she has a bed that's kind of high up, and I'll tickle her in there and everything. And she'll just kind of squeal, and her eyes will dance. And you can tell. Then she grabs her little soft blankie, and she's just like, "Oh." And so she just lights up. Her eyes start dancing. And then, then there's Cameron, my 15-year-old. And this last week, I snuck into his room just as he was fading off to sleep. And I got my face right in front of his face. And I whispered, "You are my favoriteest, Cameron." And he looked up and he punched me dead in the face. I'm just kidding. I wouldn't do that with Cameron because I know better. For one thing, he's wired totally differently than Brooklyn. For another thing, he's a 15-year-old boy, okay? So it's not necessarily for him that words don't matter to him. It's that, they need to be different words. And so here's something that I want to say right up front in this series. One of the primary purposes of the book, the 5 love languages, is to help you identify and understand your love language, and then the language of those people that are closest to you, so that you can express love to them in their language, in the form that they can best receive it. And I just want to say up front, that's not going to be my focus. The truth is, with a lot of people in your life, you may never know what their primary love language is, right? And that's okay. And you can still love them with words or quality time or gifts or acts of service or physical touch. Because the truth is, as human beings, we all need all of them. And so my focus is going to be looking at each one of the 5 and figuring out, how do we use this to its absolute fullest? Okay, so in the few minutes that remain, let's talk about words. Let's talk about the power of words and the way we use words. We know that words are incredibly powerful. I like what Proverbs 25:11 says. It says, "The right word spoken at the right time is as beautiful as gold apples in a silver bowl." Okay, the right word at the right time, in the right tone, to the right person, it's a treasure. And those people who do this, and those words, they are gold. One of the best people that I have ever known at using this particular expression was a woman named Pat. And she was the baseball coach's wife when I played in college. And she also happened to run the college ministry on campus. And she had this amazing ability to see beautiful things in people and then tell them. And so she'd constantly say stuff like, "Wow, I can't believe how good you are at," or "Man, you are so gifted with," or "What I really appreciate about you is," or "I thought it was really cool when you..." And Pat was one of the first people in my life to seriously talk to me about Jesus. And after I became a Christian, like 3 months later, she was the first person to invite me in a formal way into some kind of ministry. And so for a few months while I was going to school and playing ball, I actually lived with her and Coach. They took me in. It was kind of a thing that they would do. And at the time, I was a health food nut. And so I had all these vitamins, expensive vitamins, and all these protein drinks and shakes and stuff. And so one day she was just like, "Tell me about that." And so I was like, "Really?" And so I just went off. And I went on this huge rant about all of the nutritional benefits and antioxidants, and that was a new word back then. And she was nodding, and she was leaning forward and everything, and she was into it, I thought. And then when I paused to take a breath, she said, "You're extremely persuasive." She's like, when you talk about something with passion, when you really care about something, you have this way with words, and people will listen to you. They really, really will. And of course, she had hoped that someday I would talk about God like that. But it seemed like daily when I was with her, she just would keep telling me what she saw in me. And in several little ways that I can't really probably even remember in that season of life, what she was doing was changing the trajectory of my life. And she was a gift. Now, my guess is that you've all had people like that in your life in some way at some time. A friend, or your grandma, or a teacher, or a coach, a neighbor. But my question for you this morning is, who needs that from you? How can you use words to love somebody better? Who needs to hear affirmation or encouragement? Who needs to be admired or respected? Are your kids getting that from you? Are they as much as they could? Or how about your spouse? Or how about your parents? Or how about that person at work? How could you give somebody the gift of words this week? And so I would just encourage you, to make this really tangible, I would encourage you to pick somebody very specific, somebody that you think could really benefit from words of love from you, and just figure out how you can build them up. How you can build them up with words. And my challenge to you is to do this, to make it your goal this week to love them as completely as you can. To take every opportunity you can, without getting creepy or weird, to build them up. to look at that person and just ask, okay, what's a quality or an action or something about them that you genuinely admire or appreciate? And then just do this. Tell them. Tell them. Now, it has to be sincere. Okay, it has to be honest and non-manipulative. It actually isn't love if you're just using the words for your own benefit. But as you think about what they might need to hear, something that you can say sincerely or honestly, like just how many ways can you build that person up this week? And I challenge you to actually identify somebody and make that your project this week. Now, there's a flip side to this whole thing as well. And again, Paul says, okay, going back to the passage we just looked at, he says, do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. And just as the right word spoken at the right time is gold, the wrong word spoken at the wrong time can cut deep. I mean, words can actually destroy. One of the most difficult seasons for me of my life was when my parents got divorced. From 2 years old to fourth grade, I lived with my mom and then my stepdad. But at the end of fourth grade, like over the summer between fourth and fifth grade, they divorced. And I was 10. And my mom and I moved from Linwood to Mukilteo. And I didn't have any siblings, and so it was just me and my mom. And the change for me was just brutal. I mean, it was a new school. Nobody knew me. I had no friends in the neighborhood. Just like nothing felt right. Nothing felt normal. It was all just shocking. And I think the hardest part was that my stepdad and I had been really, really close. He was very good to me, treated me like his own, and we were very close. And we connected in a lot of ways, but the big thing for us, the main medium for us was sports. And so we would play catch all the time, or we would shoot baskets, or watch games on TV. And he's kind of a quiet guy, didn't say much, but we could really connect around sports. Now, they divorced in the summer, but by wintertime, I was playing basketball. And I couldn't play for my old team that he had coached, where we had been in championships, really good team. I had to play in Mukilteo. And pretty much like everything else at that time, it was just different. And it was hard. And like the coach didn't, he didn't like me. And he didn't treat me like I was very good. And that was tough for me, because like that was my identity. If I was good at anything, it was sports. If I was comfortable anywhere, it was on a basketball court. But even basketball wasn't going well. And so after a few games, my stepdad called, and he and my mom were really estranged, and I wasn't seeing much of him. But he said he'd like to come watch. And I don't know that I could really communicate how excited I was about that. So like the night before, I couldn't sleep, It was such a big deal. And he came, and the game didn't go well, and our team sucked, and we got killed, and I didn't play well at all. And so after the game, I went straight to my stepdad. Because, I wanted him to tell me how bad the coach was. I wanted him to tell me how bad the refs were. I wanted him to tell me how bad all of my teammates were. And I wanted him to say something like, man, this is a terrible situation. Your teammates, they can't pass or catch or shoot. They can't dribble. I mean, I don't think anybody could play well with a team like that. And the refs are horrible. They let the other team foul you right and left, and they don't call it, and they let their kids are getting away with double dribble and traveling, and this, he's just like, it's nuts over here. And your coach doesn't seem to know anything about basketball. And so I'm wanting him to say, so in light of all of that stuff, I think you're doing great. Good game. And just so you know, it's obvious to anyone that knows anything about basketball that you are really good. But, of course, that's not what he said. He just sort of looked at me disgusted and said, what the heck happened to you? It's like, I thought we had a pretty good little basketball player. And that was it. He left. Now, it's ridiculous. But as a 10-year-old, I cannot tell you what that did. So we got back to our little condo, me and my mom, and I went to bed, and as embarrassing as it is to admit, even as a 10-year-old, I was like, this is too much. This is the straw, and so I broke down, I just started weeping. And just like devastated. I couldn't seem to get over it. His words were just ringing, and it just kind of broke me, and the more I thought about it, the more I just wept. And so finally my mom, she said, all right, that's it. And she got me out of bed, and we drove over to his house, our old house, and she got him out of bed, and she showed him what a mess I was and was like, look what you did, And he was like, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. And we got over it, and it was fine, and he felt terrible. Now, I know that a lot of you have dealt with so much worse than that. I know that. I'm just telling you my experience one time with words that cut. And the crazy thing is that they came from someone that I loved deeply. And maybe, I don't know, maybe that's why they hurt so much. But here's the point. This isn't just about increasing the right words. We also have to somehow cut out the wrong words. And maybe this is something that is very, very real for you right now. There's someone in your life who just needs you to stop. Stop criticizing. Stop teasing. Stop making fun. Because you may be doing way more damage than you know. And you think, well, it's what they need. Or you go, it's just fun. Or you think, I don't really mean it. Okay. It doesn't matter how it feels to you. That's the point. What matters is the effect that it's having on them. And so maybe one of the most loving things you could possibly do this week is just stop. And this is a total aside. But dads, I just want to speak to you dads. Your words, they carry so much weight. For whatever reason, and I don't know why this is exactly, but a father's voice carries so much power. And if you're a dad, there is no one else that can speak into your kids like you. They crave approval and love from you like nobody else. Now, maybe you look at yourself and you go, well, this isn't true of me with my dad. Okay, maybe. But most people I know, it is. I know Jen's dad. His voice carries so much weight in her life. Like for good or for not so good, his voice really matters to her. And he can build her up, he can tear her down. Now, she loves her mom, but it's not the same. And I look at this and go, why is this so often the case? And I can't help but wonder if this is just kind of how we're wired. There's something in us that is wired for a father's voice. Maybe there's just a need in us that runs real deep. And when that need goes unmet, then we get all goofy. We get all weird. Like, what is it? You think about it. What is it that in us that leads to sarcasm and criticism and just like mean or angry words? And so often what's happening is they're just flowing out of this emptiness that's in us. And that's the serious issue. And so this is really important. This gets deeply into what it is to actually be spiritually formed or transformed. Our goal in this is not just that we're aiming at doing good things. If you just try to do like more loving things, you will eventually exhaust yourself. The idea is that we aim at becoming the kind of person through whom loving actions just flow. And Jesus would talk about this. Like, he's like, this is it. He would talk about this. He'd say, you don't just wash the outside of the cup. You got to clean the inside. Or he would say, a good tree bears good fruit. Like, it comes from the inside. He says, don't just aim at doing right things. Don't just aim at doing loving stuff. Aim at becoming somebody who's rooted enough in love and free enough from sin that love just flows out of you. And you go, well, how does that happen? How do we become that sort of person? And this is interesting. I don't know if you knew in the Gospel of Mark, the first words that are involving love were not spoken by Jesus. They were actually spoken to Jesus. After he'd been baptized, Mark says, a voice came from heaven. You are my beloved Son, whom I love. With you, I'm well pleased. Think about that. You are my beloved Son, whom I love. With you, I'm well pleased. And see, I think Jesus was rooted in love. I think Jesus was rooted in that voice. And right after this, he went into the wilderness for 40 days, we're told. And that's the voice that he listened to. And then in the midst of his ministry, over and over again, there was all of this important stuff to do and craziness and pressure on him. And Mark tells us that very early in the morning, while everybody else was still asleep, Jesus would go off alone. And this is the voice that he would listen to. You're my son. I love you so much. I'm pleased with you. And I just want to say to you guys that the most important words this week will not be the ones that I say or that you say. They will be the ones that we hear. And God is saying, you're my son, or you're my daughter, and I love you.